This video is sponsored by Card Kingdom. You can visit their store by using my referral link in the description below. Hi everyone, I'm Nizzanotes, and today is Saturday, and that means it's time for Nizzanotes, my weekly vlog series about limited Magic. It is pre-release weekend for the Brothers War, and on Tuesday it'll be on Magic Arena, so we're all playing this new limited format, or about to be playing this new limited format. Over the last week or so, I've been doing my set review, giving you my thoughts on every single card in the set. And, as is usually the case, for the first Nizzanotes when we're playing a new format, I'm going to sort of distill my set review into a list of the best 3 commons and the best 1 uncommon in each color. So, let's dive right in, starting with white. I think white's third best common is Nizzanotes Cavalry. In a lot of formats, a 5-mana 3/4 flyer is sort of a begrudgingly playable card, a card that you would play in your deck a decent chunk of the time, but is never that good. But this adds a pretty real Enter the Battlefield trigger for the format in that it can put a +1/+1 counter on a soldier. The blue-white deck is about soldiers, but this will work pretty well in red-white too. There's lots of red soldiers, so this is a nice curve topper for red-white aggro decks. You're just going to have soldiers around. There's lots of soldier creature tokens. It's a very prominent creature type in the format, and not just in the blue-white color pair. You know, like I said, if you're going to be red-white, if you're going to be green-white, you're probably going to have soldiers, and this will be a playable card. It's certainly not something you want to take early, because it does take a little bit of work to get full value out of it, but I like that it has a reasonable floor and a pretty nice ceiling. I think white's second best common is Nizzanotes Cavalry. So there's this whole cycle of common creatures that all enter the battlefield, mill 3 things, and then if you mill something of the right type, you get to put that card into your hand, and you can just choose not to take something back if you didn't hit something with the right type. And if you do that, it gets a +1/+1 counter. Same is true if you whiff. And they're all pretty nice. I think at least 2 of them are going to be in this video, and this one certainly is. A 3-mana 1/1 flyer is not a good rate, but, think of it as a 3-mana 1/1 flyer that is going to draw you a card a decent chunk of the time, and it sounds a lot better. It's not quite as good as that 3-mana 2/1 that entered the battlefield, gained you a life, and drew you a card that we saw in New Capenna, but, it's sort of comparable. White also is a little graveyard-oriented in this set, so you get some value out of milling yourself in general, so that has some nice synergy too. So basically, it's Wind Drake or a 3-mana 1/1 flyer that draws you a card. Both of those are nice cards. Again, not something I really want to first pick, but it's pretty good. And then I think white's best common, and by a fairly large margin, is Prison Sentence. Arrest is always really good in limited. Shutting down activated abilities in addition to the usual pacifism effect is really good. In this format especially, there are a lot of creatures that just have like random abilities they tacked onto them, so you could use your Power Stones to pay for them. So shutting down activated abilities is probably slightly better in this format than usual. And then the fact this has Scry 2 attached to it is just amazing. You get this premium removal spell that can pretty much deal with anything. And then you also get to drastically improve your next card that you draw, which is really nice to attach to a card that already would probably be white's best common, even if it didn't Scry 2, but it does. So it's even better than that. And then white's best uncommon was a lot harder for me to narrow down to, which is a good problem to have for white, I suppose. And in the end, I was sort of looking at both Static Net and Combat Thresher. Combat Thresher brings up the fact that in this video, cards that have an identity of a particular color are eligible for me to discuss them as one of the best commons or uncommons in their color. But yeah, both of these are great. Static Net gives you another powerful removal spell, like Prison Sentence. This deals with anything. It even deals with non-land permanents more generally. And it costs 1 more than Oblivion Ring, which is sort of, what it's modeled after. But you also get a Power Stone, and Power Stones are a big deal. Getting 1 or 2 of them most games is going to really benefit you because you have activated abilities, you have artifacts you can play, so you get a lot of value out of Static Net. And then Combat Thresher, meanwhile, is pretty much always a 2-for-1, whether you cast it as a prototype or for its full cost. And it's also a great place to put counters or auras or equipment or combat tricks. There's just so many things in the format that line up well with the Thresher. It's also an artifact. You can cast it with Power Stones. And the modality on the card is great. Like, even if this didn't have the option to cast it as a big creature late, it would be great. probably not in the running with Static Net to be the best uncommon in white, but it would be a great card. But then you have this late game option where if you have mana lying around and you can use it, you know, you're just going to cast this as a bigger, more threatening creature. So both of these are sort of 1A and 1B for me at this point. I'm having a hard time deciding which one I like more, but they're both great. Let's move now to blue, where I think blue's third best common is Mightstone's Animation. You know, this kind of card is the kind of card you sort of roll your eyes at in 99% of sets because animating an artifact is just hard to line up in Limited. But this format is an artifact-heavy set, and you'll be spitting out Power Stones with relative ease. You know, every color has one pretty good common that makes a Power Stone, and then there's a bunch of uncommons that do it too. So you'll have Power Stones around, and the idea of playing this on one of those is just amazing. I mean, it's almost going to feel like a 2-for-1. It falls a little short of being a full-blown 2-for-1, but putting this on a Power Stone, turning it into a 4-4, and it'll kind of have haste, you know, assuming it's been in play, and drawing a card off of it is just a big deal. Like, that is a big turn you can have. It also triggers prowess and stuff if you're in that kind of deck because it's an enchantment. It draws you an extra card, which triggers stuff in the blue-black deck. It just lines up super well in a lot of different decks in the format. And I think, you know, again, if you looked at this card in a vacuum, you'd be like, yeah, you don't want to play that. But you do. I mean, you know, one of the downsides with these is your opponent could remove what you're targeting, but you can play around that to some extent. And also, if you're targeting a Power Stone, it's not the biggest blowout in the world, even if they do stop you. Worth noting, you can also put this on creatures and stuff if you really need to draw the card. Upgrading a creature isn't nearly as good as turning a Power Stone into one, but you can do it in a pinch. I think blue's second best common is Koilos Rock. You know, 5 mana 3/3 flying flash is, you know, a passable limited card most of the time, and adding a Power Stone is a big deal. You know, I've already talked about how good those are a fair bit in this video, and I talked about it throughout the week in the set review. But yeah, I mean, the fact that you get a Power Stone out of this is a big deal. You're going to have things to spend that mana on. You can flash this into ambush stuff. You know, times where you get to flash this in and eat a 2/2 flyer are going to feel amazing. You know, you're not always going to get to do it, but, you know, flash is also nice. You can leave up mana, you know, and leave up that mana to actually cast maybe an instant. But then if there's no reason for you to play that instant, you can just play, you know, this rock and flash it into play at the end of their turn. And you have that Power Stone right away on your next turn, which is nice. I don't love the idea of first picking either of those two blue cards, by the way. And again, I think we have a common that is sort of head and shoulders better than either of these second and third best commons, and that's Wing Commando. Yeah, I mean, if you haven't played with full-blown prowess before, I think you'll be surprised at how effective it is at making a creature very, very difficult to interact with in combat. You know, it's on this in this set on a few different cards, including a couple of commons. And this one starts out as a Windrake, which, you know, isn't the greatest rate these days, but it's like a D+ or a C- at worst. And then there's a whole spell deck in the format. Prowess is just a massive, massive upgrade. People just can't block your things with Prowess unless they have a creature that's significantly larger, or they're going to end up just in so much trouble. And, you know, this has an amazing floor and a pretty high ceiling. Going to be great in any deck, really. That's one thing that's nice about it. You can play it in any deck. You're going to have non-creature spells in every deck in the format, but in blue-red, you're incentivized to do it even more. Still, great card. Really like Wing Commando. I think it's significantly better than these other commons. And then I think blue's best uncommon, and this one's going to surprise you a little bit if you've followed my content for a while, it's an aura. It's Take Flight. You know, I normally don't like auras. I hate the 2-for-1 potential they give you. They're just so situational. But this card solves that problem primarily by letting you draw a card every time the creature attacks. It's not when it hits the opponent. That's what I thought it was when I first read it. It's when it attacks. That is a huge deal. That means your opponent can't like chump block it or even trade with it without you drawing the card. You just get to draw the card. You do have to find the right window to use the card, or, you know, your opponent could respond by killing your creature and then you do get blown out. But once you resolve this, it's pretty bad or pretty impossible for you to not end up coming out dead even or ahead of your opponent. If they don't kill the thing you put this on, they're going to lose. And it's as simple as that. And, you know, +1/+0 and flying for 4 isn't a great rate, but when you combine it with this whenever it attacks draw a card ability, it's pretty insane because it can make almost any creature capable of taking advantage of that ability. It is a great uncommon, and one I'm looking forward to playing with as much as possible. Now let's move to black. I think black is the deepest when it comes to commons. All three of the commons I'm going to talk about here are cards I think you can first pick with relative happiness. So let's dive into them. I think Black's third best common is Scrapwork Rager. That's right, Phyrexian Rager is back again in a somewhat different form. I'm not sure what the lore is there. Is this like the prototype? Of course, it doesn't have the mechanic prototype. Is it the prototype for the later Rager because we're back in time? I don't know, and I don't really care. Point is, this is a good card. A 4-mana 2/2 that draws you a card and you lose 1 life isn't amazing, but this comes back from the graveyard with Unearth, and that means you're getting a 2-for-1 and generating a 3-for-1 with it. Not that hard either. You can play this thing, draw your card, whatever. Then if you're in like black-red, you can sacrifice it for value. If you're in any other deck, you can just trade it off for something, and then you unearth it, you get to draw a card again, and maybe you get in for 2, or you sacrifice it again. It's just really well positioned in this format. It gives you card advantage. It has good synergy with the archetypes that we have in the set. It's a nice common, and like I said, I think it is one you can first pick sometimes. I think Black's second best common is Disfigure. 1 black mana for -2/-2. You know, this is a reprint. It's always great. It's always, not always, but almost always going to trade up. And if it doesn't, you're usually breaking even. It's even nice that you can use it in combat in situations where, you know, you want your creature to win and you need to kill theirs. That's not the optimal use because things can go super wrong once you're in combat, of course, but it does have that upside in addition to just being an incredibly efficient removal spell. And then Black's best common is Overwhelming Remorse. So, you know, another great removal spell. No surprise there. Black's 2 best commons are removal spells. 5 mana to kill anything at instant speed would not be good enough to be the best black common, but it would probably still be third on this list after the Disfigure and Scrapwork Rager. So that tells you something because it's frequently going to cost 4 or less. And once we're talking about 4, that's probably enough to jump it to the number 1 out of these 3. And it's going to be significantly cheaper with relative ease. Most decks are going to have 15 creatures. If you're black-green, you're going to be milling yourself. Like, this will be able to kill things incredibly efficiently. And then I think Black's best uncommon, and I think an early candidate for best uncommon in the set, is Gurgling Anointer. 3 mana 1/3 flyer as a baseline is pretty nice on a card that then has 2 very nice abilities. Anytime you draw a second card during your turn, it just gets a counter. And when it dies, it lets you reanimate something that has power less than or equal to its power. It's not impossible that even if you don't get any counter on this, that it reanimates something directly to the board. You know, there's enough 1-power creatures in the set that I think doing that is going to be pretty reasonable. Obviously, in an ideal world, you do give it counters and it's able to reanimate stuff. And, you know, the fact that it's less than or equal to is just so good. Like, you know, usually I think on this card we would see just less than, right? And that would mean at 1 power, it basically can't reanimate anything. At 2, it can barely reanimate anything. But now we're talking about 1 power. It can reanimate a decent number of things. At 2, it can reanimate a lot of things from the early game. And then after that, it just gets completely out of control. In the end, it basically kills your opponent in the air as it continues to grow, or they kill it and they get 2-for-1. You know, it feels like a rare in a lot of ways. That's how good the Anointer is. All right, let's move to red now, where I think the third best red common is Unleash Shell. So I don't love the idea of having more than one of these for the most part. You know, it may shake out that in this format you do want a couple because creatures are big, I guess. But, you know, paying 5 to kill something and do 5 damage to it is not an awesome rate. It is a solid rate. And the fact you get to shock your opponent in the face adds some extra value to it. But, you know, typically in Limited, the number of 5-mana removal spells you want is fairly limited. And so, you know, going beyond 1 copy of this and certainly beyond 2, probably not amazing. But that first copy should be valued pretty highly. I think Red's second best common is Dwarven Forge Chanter. So another prowess creature at common. It's, you know, good friends with Wing Commando. Having a curve where you play this and then Wing Commando is just going to be a nightmare for your opponent. And that's 2 commons. So that tells you how good prowess is. You know, you're just going to have situations where, you know, your opponent can't block this. There's going to be a lot of situations where you can blow your opponent out if they do block. And I love the ward here. You know, it's not the most amazing ward ever, but it makes sure that your opponent takes some damage, and I'm all for that. And then I think Red's best common, and it's another one where it's by a pretty wide margin. Like, I don't love the idea of first picking Forge Chanter or Unleash Shell. Love the idea of first picking Excavation Explosion. 3 mana to do 3 damage to anything. Already probably would make it the best common in red, but it also gives you a Power Stone. Like, this Power Stone is like for free because this is already a really good card. And yeah, so that is some very real value. You can finish your opponent off with it. You can kill a lot of creatures with it, and you even get some mana back. And then I think red's best uncommon is Obliterating Bolt. Not particularly interesting, right? But great removal spell. 2 mana to do 4 to a creature. It gets exiled if you kill it. That matters in this format. It matters in all formats, but in this format, you've got Unearth all over the place, and it helps get around that. Let's move now to green. I think green's best common is Argothian Opportunist. Another creature, another card where you basically get a free Power Stone. I mean, 3 mana 3/2 is below rate, but not by a lot. You don't need to add a lot to a 3 mana 3/2 for it to be good, and they added a lot to a 3 mana 3/2 for it to be good in the form of a Power Stone, which can really accelerate you into things, really let you do exactly what you want to be doing in a lot of green decks. I think green's second best common is Boulder Branch Golem. 4 mana 3/3 to gain 3 life. You know, that wouldn't be the best common or on the list of best green commons, but that's something you play. You know, it's just such a good card at helping you stabilize in most green strategies, whether you're trying to ramp or, you know, make the game go longer so you can grind out some value. Those are the things that green usually does in limited. And so playing a 4 mana 3/3 that can probably trade with something of your opponent's and gain you 3 life's a big deal. And then in the later game, you can cast it much larger and gain even more life. And both of those options together makes for a really good common. Still, I don't love the idea of first picking either of those. I could see that changing. You know, both of these are cards that I think have room to grow for sure in the format. But, you know, for right now, I don't love the idea going into this format in the early stages of first picking it, but I could see it happening. And then I think green's best common is Epic Confrontation. It's a reprint and a great removal spell. You'll be surprised how often +1/+2 makes your creature win combat, and you'll also be surprised how often using this clears out your opponent's only relevant blocker and allows you to swing with everything. And then I think green's best uncommon is Obstinate Baloth. You know, it's basically, in most ways, a better Boulder Branch Golem because it's a 4 mana 4/4 that gains you 4. And that's just a great card. You know, that's 4 mana for a 4/4 is still an amazing rate in limited. The end of the battlefield ability is great here. You're probably never putting it into play for free. I shouldn't say never, but, you know, you're not going to do it much. But if you do, it'll be amazing, obviously. So those are my picks for the best commons and uncommon in each color. Now I want to do a crack-a-pack so I can sort of talk about some more cards in this video. We'll look at a pack one, pick one situation. I'll tell you how I'm feeling about each of these cards in this very early stage of the format and what I would first pick out of the pack. All right, so here is our pack. Our first card is our Retro Frame Artifact. Every pack in the set has one of these. It's Well of Lost Dreams. You know, this card is, I think, actually playable, but you do really have to build around it. There's no life gain deck in the format. There is life gain in the set, and if you can pick up enough of it, Well of Lost Dreams becomes an insane engine, but doing it isn't that easy, so it's not the kind of build around that you take and you're like, yeah, this will be easy for me to make work since I took it with this first pick. Not so much. You're just not going to have the synergy for it that often. It's more of a build around. You pick up kind of mid to late pack and then see if you get the right things to make it do its thing, because it's a complete dud if you don't get the right stuff. But yeah, we don't want to be first picking it. Blitz Automaton. This was knocking on the door on my list for 3 best red commons, and I could see it getting there in the end. 3 mana 3/2 with haste is a solid card, and then in the late game you can play this as like a huge haste creature. And you know, I've said it in the set review and stuff, but I think it bears repeating because people make this mistake a lot in limited. Yes, a 7 mana 6/4 with haste is not a good rate. You know, if you're just going on rate alone, that's not good. But when you're talking about modality on a card like this, like modality is so strong in limited because in the early game, this is a nice 3-drop for you to curve out with. And then in the late game, sometimes you draw this and you just have the mana. So you pay it and you slam the card on the table. Yes, it's not efficient, but guess what? It's a 6/4 haste in limited. It's attacking your opponent right away, and they've got to do something about it. And so having that modality is just, it's big. And that's what makes Blitz Automaton into a significantly better card than it might look at first. Certainly take it over Well of Lost Dreams. Latinam Adept. This thing seems like an okay to mediocre payoff for the draw extra cards deck. Certainly not something you first pick. Phalanx Vanguard, this is like a nice 2-drop. I mean, it's a 2-2 with Vigilance, and it will frequently be able to attack for 3 or 4 because there's lots of artifacts in the set, including Power Stones. I think Blitz Automaton is probably better, though. Raise to the Ground is next. Format has a lot of artifacts, and, this kind of effect is often nice to have one of, but this one's not so good or efficient that I want to first pick it at all. I think Blitz Automaton is still better. Goblin Blast Runner, this is a nice 1-drop if you're like a really aggressive sacrifice deck that got there on Synergy. Kind of like Latnam Adept, though, it's the kind of payoff that you take when you're already in the deck and not the kind you go after to make the deck work. Next, it's Perimeter Patrol. Nice common. It's sort of the companion to Phalanx Vanguard. The green-white deck is about getting triggers when you have an artifact into the battlefield, and these two commons showcase that. They're both nice, efficient creatures with that ability. Still think Blitz Automaton's probably better. Power Stone Fracture is pretty nice. It's funny that they put it in its name because it's so obvious you want to sack Power Stones, but the flavor's good. It's good removal if you have the Power Stones around. It's not that good if you don't. Still on Automaton. Deadly Riposte is next. This is an okay removal spell if you're a more defensive deck. You don't really want to play it if you're an aggressive one. That keeps you from really wanting to take it early. Still on Automaton. I'm hoping we see something better than an Automaton here. Machine Over Matter. Decent bounce spell. You'll play this especially in blue-red, but, bounce spells like this only generate tempo, and they almost never net you a card, and that's a problem. So I'm still on Automaton. Moving to uncommons now. I think the Automaton is the best common in this pack, and yeah, I think this pack in terms of its commons has actually been pretty weak, if that's the case. Flow of Knowledge is next. Some of these cards in this cycle that care about a basic land type actually work in Limited. I don't feel like this is one of those. You had to be pretty close to monocolored for this to consistently net you the right number of cards. There are reasons to draw extra cards in the format in the blue-black deck, and I mean, it's nice to do in general, but it's just so much mana and so finicky about what you have to do to set it up that I don't like it very much. It's a card that you can, if you want it, you can get pretty late because only someone who's almost mono blue is basically going to want it. So still on the Automaton. Next up, we've got Monastery Swift Spear. So yeah, this card's good. We talked about a couple of prowess cards in the best commons and uncommons. This is obviously an uncommon one. And yeah, I mean, 1 mana for a 1/2 with haste and prowess is a tough thing to block. If you can play this on turn 1, you get in for 1 that turn, obviously. And then on turn 2, let's say your opponent plays a 2-drop. Well, they basically can't block, so you get to attack them again. And then, from there, things do sort of drop off a bit with the Swift Spear, but it's still able to rumble for a whole lot of the game because of the threat of activation and because of the fact that you probably can pump it and cause your opponent a lot of problems. Is it better than Blitz Automaton, though? I mean, I don't think so. And I think I think it is sort of in a vacuum. Like, if you're going to end up in the blue-red deck, Swift Spear is probably better. But I think the Automaton is better in a wider variety of decks. Like, it'll slot into every red deck in the format. Swift Spear does not. So I think you're still on Automaton. And our last uncommon is Alloy Animist. I think this thing's a fine sort of late game payoff for having a bunch of Power Stones because you can use the mana to pay for the ability and just slam in with a couple of 4/4s. But again, like, it's another card. We're still on Blitz Automaton here, which is crazy to me. Because, yeah, I mean, it's another card that really needs the right deck to work out, and it has a pretty bad floor. So I don't see myself taking it over Automaton. We do, however, have a mythic rare we're going to take over the Automaton by a wide margin. It's the best card in this pack by a lot because this pack ended up not being that good. I guess, before we talk about this mythic rare, if Blitz Automaton was really the best I could do in this pack, I think I'd consider taking the Well, just because it has such a high ceiling and the rest of this pack is so medium. I know I said, you don't want to take it, and that's mostly true. But if you have a pack like this one where everything in the pack is like C plus or worse, which is what we're looking at, I think you consider taking a card with a much higher ceiling. But anyway, we don't have to worry about it because we've got a mythic rare, one of the bombs of the set, Awaken the Woods. It makes X/1/1 green forest dryad land creature tokens, in other words, dryad arbors. Yeah, I mean, it's just good at every stage of the game. I mean, maybe it's not great when you pay 3 for it, but paying 4 for it, you know, that sets you up to ramp significantly. And you know, builds out your board at the same time. And then as the game goes on and as you accumulate more mana, Awaken the Woods just populate your board with a bunch of bodies, and that is in itself quite powerful. So it is what we picked here. I think after that it is Well of Lost Dreams because this pack ended up being so underwhelming. Then Blitz Automaton, followed by Swift Spear, I think is what we're looking at. And then like Perimeter Patrol, Phalanx Vanguard after that. All right, that will do it for this edition of Nizzanotes. Next week, I think I'll be back probably talking about some early overperformers and underperformers in the format. That's usually what happens, you know, during the second week of a new format. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like it and share it so that others can enjoy it too. If you want to make sure you catch future videos, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications. If you want to see my set review, which is complete, check out that playlist, which you should see on your screen shortly. Thanks for watching.